Well, it's taken a while, probably a little bit too long. In part, I actually forgot that I hadn't done the final team yet. So here it is, the last of my 2015 NFL Draft team grades. We come now to the Super Bowl 49 champions, the deflators themselves, the New England Patriots. And when you look at the Patriots, one thing I think that is impressive when it comes to this organization is the fact that this team has been a consistent contender for a decade and a half now. A decade and a half for the most part. And we're talking about a team that consistently finds themselves picking at the tail end of the draft each and every single year. And at some point in time, you would expect that to catch up with an organization. At some point in time, you would say you miss out on so much marquee talent supposedly at the top that at some point in time, it'll be cyclical. You'll eventually find yourself picking at the top portion of the draft. It's bound to happen. You know, somehow, some way, the New England Patriots, after all of these years, still find a way to find guys that fit their system, guys that can contribute in most every draft, and they find a way to consistently picking in this spot. This is the type of team you want to be, minus the cheating allegations and shit, what have you. You want to be a team that's picking at the tail end portion of every draft because that means you've gotten it right consistently year in and year out. You're consistently in the mix. You're a championship contender. Some years you're probably winning championships. You worry about the rest of that bullshit later. And I look at this 2015 New England Patriots draft, in some ways, to me, it mirrors so many other drafts that they've had over the years. It really, truly does. And it kind of speaks to how this team, you know, ends up consistently finding themselves in a contending position, even though sometimes they don't do the best job in the draft from a top-to-bottom standpoint. And usually, a lot of times, I look back at some of the best Patriots drafts, and here's what you'll have. You'll have a guy fall to them in the first round that had absolutely no business falling that far, and yet he does, and the Patriots are just right there to swoop him up. I think back to like a Vince Wilfork in 2004 with that 21st pick is just one notable example of this. Then you get to day number 2, let's say rounds 2 or 3, and sometimes you wonder what the hell the Patriots are doing and how they're setting up their draft board. And you look at this year's draft, you see guys like Jordan Richards from Stanford and Geneo Grissom from Oklahoma, and you wonder that. And then when you hear reports about the fact that the Patriots only had I think it was 15 or 20 players on their board, and after that they just went for guys that Belichick liked or thought might fit the system, you know, you can sit there and understand sometimes why people question Bill Belichick as a general manager running a draft because, you know, there got to be more players than 15 or 20 that fit what you do on the offensive or defensive side of the ball. I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. And furthermore, if you're not that sure of these guys at these picks to the point where you didn't even have them rated on your board, if they weren't guys that you had rated on your board, then why would you be drafting them at all? Why would you not just sit there and try and peel back and accumulate additional picks? You know, sometimes that's the thing. And you look back and you see these potentially wasted picks, guys like Richards and Grissom, and you wonder how the Patriots are able to get by and how they're able to consistently contend. Well, then you look at what they did in day 3, most especially I think in this case more so than what they did in round number 4 at the beginning of day 3. You're getting Trey Flowers from Arkansas, one of the best edge rushers I thought in this 2015 NFL draft. The fact they got him in round 4 was borderline criminal. Then getting a couple of offensive linemen that were pretty good values at their spots in round 4 in a couple of guards, and Trey Jackson from Florida State and Shaq Mason from Georgia Tech. 2 guys that could be potentially future NFL starters on the interior of their offensive line. So I'm looking at potentially 3 starters on day 3 of the draft. Throwing in the fact a guy that to me in a lot of ways was a top 15 or 20 talent in this draft, they were able to get him at pick number 32. I mean, that's the Patriots. It's so much of an emblematic thing of what they've been able to do over the years. They'll find that star. Then, even with the guys like Richards or Grissom, one of them will bust out horribly, but then the other one will end up outplaying the pre-draft rankings that a lot of people had for him. And then you'll have a couple of guys that contribute out of the undrafted or day 3 ranks. They just come in, they fit the system, and they do their job, and the New England Patriots way continues. That's what this draft was in a lot of ways. It was a typical Bill Belichick New England Patriots draft. At moments you're impressed, at moments you're like, what the fuck is going on? But the entirety of it, the overall body of it, you know, even when you look at them taking a long snapper from Navy in the 5th round, you're like, what the fuck is that? You know, sometimes you just deal with that. There is some stupidity to Bill Belichick drafts. There is. There's no question about it. And recent history definitely indicates that. But boy, when they hit, they hit, and they hit really, really big. And they seem to find a way throughout every draft to hit on one or two guys, if not more, each and every single year. In terms of their best pick out of this draft, by far it's got to be Malcom Brown from Texas. I mean, the Patriots were just able to sit there and wait and wait and wait as inferior prospects were drafted, and all the while they get their Vince Wilfork replacement with the last pick of round number 1. So now you've got a guy that was a top 15 or top 20 talent in this draft. You got him at the 32nd overall pick, which means you only have to pay him 32nd overall money. You have the potential to have control over him for 5 years. It's the New England Patriots. It just seems to be the way it freaking works out for them. So often it's not just what the Patriots do in the draft. It's what other teams don't do, and other teams screw the pooch that allows the Patriots to continue to be in this successful type of situation. It was a great pick of Malcom Brown at the end of round number 1. In terms of guys that I really liked and I think could impress and could surprise, there's several of them. I look at Trey Flowers. I think he's a guy that could play some strong side backer for them, but be a situational pass rusher. Might someday end up being a replacement for Nikovich opposite Chandler Jones at defensive end. I like Trey Jackson and Shaq Mason. I expect at least one of them to end up being a long-term starter inside at guard for them. And even a guy like Jordan Richards. You know, while he wasn't a second-round talent by any stretch of the imagination, he's that type of leader, that type of cerebral guy back there at the safety position that Bill Belichick loves, and I think is a guy that could end up long-term justifying this draft position. Now, in terms of things I second-guess, I do second-guess them still, taking Richards in round 2 and Grissom in round 3. If these weren't guys that you had on your board at all, then that means you didn't have them rated here. So then why the hell would you take them here? And why the hell would you not try to accumulate either additional day 3 draft pick currency in this draft, or try to accumulate some day 1 or day 2 draft pick currency in the next draft or the draft after that, when it looks like the 2016 draft is going to be even stronger than the 2015 draft? You know, I don't really understand that, and I don't really understand why they thought somebody like Grissom was a 3rd-round talent, and why they thought he was worth taking a pick there. I don't really get it. Same thing with Richards, too. He probably was a guy that could have been there in round 4. It was a weak safety class, and you're reaching on a guy in round 2. That's not very sensible. You know, and taking a long snapper from Navy in the 5th round. Couldn't you have found a long snapper in the undrafted ranks? If you love Cardona so much, maybe just take him in the 7th round. You probably could have rolled the dice, and he probably still would have been there. I'm just saying. But overall, in a lot of ways, like I said, this is the type of draft you would expect from the New England Patriots for different reasons. They'll get somebody in the 1st round that they had no business getting or ending up with, and yet they do, and the guy ends up becoming a 10-year contributor and big-time player for them. They befuddle you with a couple of picks because you just don't see him coming, and you're like, what the hell is Belichick doing? But then they find a couple of gems in day 3 that end up being long-term contributors at well, and the Patriots' way will continue, and they'll just continue to be championship contenders. That's what this draft was. It was a B- C+ draft. I think Brown's going to be a stud for him. I think they got some good day 3 value. And like I said, either Richards or Grissom, one of the two is going to end up somewhat justifying that draft position. So it'll end up being a good draft long-term for this Patriots organization. And God knows they need it, knowing that they're not going to have a 1st-round pick next year, which makes even more so with what happened with day 2 of this draft a little more puzzling, because they could have maybe peeled out of those picks entirely and gotten some additional currency in terms of draft picks in 16 and 17, where they don't have the 1st-round pick in 16 and they don't have a 4th-round pick in 17. Just, you know, the hindsight is 2020. I still thought the Patriots did a solid job with the situation that they had based off of the draft position that they had.